The crow, used as symbolism across cultures and time to mean everything from spiritual omens of death, symbols of decay, messengers of the gods, or even the gods themselves. Through my exploration of the origins of the interpretations of the bird, I came across historical connections and noticed applications of imagery and related characters of folklore in some of my favorite games. With the crow as a through line, this video is a simple analysis of allegory in two games that I love, and in different amount, how the crow works as symbolism within them.
My name is Alex Mercer.
The crow as a symbol of death or disease is one of its most common and understood applications across cultures. I'd like to discuss its relation to disease and decay to explain why I think it works so well as part of the opening and ending cinematics of the game Prototype. Specifically, the historical significance to the Great Plague, which I also believe the game has allusion to in its many artistic choices. Crows are scavenger birds, so often when an area is full of dead things, they're likely to be nearby in massive numbers. A huge contributor to the European idea that crows are bad is the number of crows in an area would rise as the death toll did, associating their arrival in larger and larger numbers as an indicator of how bad it will become by the time disease has made its rounds. Crows bring forth the prediction of great death and great disease. Imagine when people died of disease in vast numbers like during the time of the plague. Consider it was so bad that there were literal plague carts that would go around and collect bodies from communities every few days, and reportedly, crows would just follow these carts. Bodies would be dumped into communal mass graves called plague pits, and they were reportedly often filled with crows. While I couldn't find a reliable direct source, an article by a bird expert I read suggested that at the time, people did assume that crows were part of what was spreading the disease, which would make sense considering they were flying around victims' corpses, eating them, and then flying back into town all the time. Another way the image of the crow can invoke ideas of death and disease and the plague is, while they looked a little bit sillier than what we may remember, plague doctors wore masks meant to purify the sickness out of the air by way of a long beak-like snout stuffed with flowers. And, I mean, the resemblance is just uncanny. Symptoms of the actual plague itself were no less than a thing of nightmares. While today we treat the plague very early in its affliction with hospitalization, monitoring vitals, isolation to prevent spread, and a round of antibiotics, in the past we had no such medical science, and therefore any infection was almost certain to spread to the lungs or blood, causing sepsis, pneumonia, and a verifiable stamp of death without very prompt treatment. The bacteria that causes the plague is considered highly contagious, spread through any liquid droplets expelled from the body. The disease is also zoonotic, meaning it can jump from animal to human, so the main cause of infection outside of peer-to-peer transfer was through fleas that jump between small mammals or pets and then to people in places where pests were common, which was everywhere at the time, or just fleas jumping directly from person to person. The flea-burdened rat, a common carrier of the disease, contribute to its spread via ships harboring them as they move from port to port along trade routes in Europe. While there are technically 3 types of the plague named after the area of infection, the most recognizable is bubonic, primarily affecting the lymph nodes. The iconic symptom of bubonic plague is swelling of the lymph nodes called bubo. These bulges reach sizes up to 4 inches or about the size of your standard doorknob and will leak pus, discharge, and spread the infection. Prototype, outside of literally being a game about horrific, all-consuming disease outbreak, either purposeful or otherwise, does a fantastic job of alluding to the plague through visual symbolism, like its use of the crow in the opening and ending cinematics, and imagery of disease and decay throughout the game. The introduction cinematic starts with a pan-out from Alex Mercer, patient zero and the original source of the outbreak in the city Manhattan, as it confirms what has been said about him since it happened, calling himself a killer, a monster, and a terrorist. While this happens, we see the blacklight virus take over the streets, covering cars and corpses in vein-like branches, visually filling the scenery with sepsis. We cut to crows scavenging the eyeball off the body and then flying away as Alex Mercer runs by. The blacklight virus is a collection of variant strains of living collective conscious organisms. How I understand it, it infects people by invading their cells and using their DNA to create a copy controlled by the virus, but with unrealized DNA triggers now activated. This causes major mutations, ranging from total organ failure and death to super soldiers to literal humanoid manifestations of the virus, capable of manipulating the organic material it absorbs into weapons or hardening itself into armor, similar to, but ultimately not as powerful, as Alex Mercer himself. Later in the game, Alex discovers another patient zero from the original strain of the virus. The secondary antagonist, Elizabeth Green, is a kidnapped woman used to incubate the earlier version of the blacklight virus, which they called the red light virus. She now allows it to consume the city. her main role in the story after Alex helps her escape containment, and she turns out not to be a not-so-great kind of person. She spends her time running around the city creating hives, buildings covered in pustule-like growths that burst and spew out horrific monsters that spread the virus, and also violently kill people indiscriminately. While Alex must consume the body of a person to add their memories and abilities to his own arsenal, Elizabeth has a natural psychic control over all individuals she's infected. Her final form in the game is that of Mother, a giant fleshy mass surrounding her body, with 3 legs increasing in length protruding from one side. This could very well be a coincidence, but I can't help but see the resemblance of this form to that of a flea under a microscope. Another action taken by Green in the game is infecting the city water towers. These towers work as incubators, harboring the infection to spread to citizens. When the player gets too close, they burst and release the same enemy that comes from the hives. The player can identify the location of these towers from the large murder of crows that circle them continuously after they spawn. In the second game, these incubation towers are replaced by fleshy pustules, spawning their own unique enemy when the player approaches. The nature of crows being blamed for the spread of disease and signaling of death comes to meet full circle at the end of the game. Mercer, after setting off a bomb in the ocean to stop the total destruction of the city, is just a few blobs of biomass floating on the shore. And then who do we see but a poor little crow looking for a snack, landing a little too close, and then ultimately being consumed by the virus. Alex is born from the body of the crow, and the plague is spread once again. While the crow isn't by any means the mascot of the game, this is clearly an intentional callback to the introduction and a use of symbolism to foreshadow what is to come with Mercer's survival.
You may call me Morrigan.
The Morrigan, an Irish goddess of battle, fate, and fertility. She's depicted regularly as a hooded crow. The Morrigan is a shapeshifter, so the crow is not her only form. She also takes many other forms, mostly that of old and young women, as well as a wolf. In one of her most famous legends, she starts in the form of a cow. There are some sources that refer to the Morrigan as a tri-entity, technically 3 goddesses operating as one unit. Hint, the Morrigan. Each entity represents a branch of what the Morrigan embodies. Her lore is tied closely with several groups of gods and goddesses, her symbolism drawing from other related myths, sometimes directly related or referencing her. Other times, simply sharing abilities and actions in a way that connects them. The most used names for her 3 parts are Bavi, Maha, and Niemen. In reading, I've seen other names ascribed to them, but these seem to be the general consensus 90% of the time, as well as the ones used in the sources I used for this video. The first is the form of the battle crow, associated with bloodshed, fate, and strategy. She has the power to decide who dies, and afterwards, it is said she feeds on the dead. There are stories of crows and ravens circling battlefields before a skirmish takes place because they've learned that soon there'll be a feast for them. If I was a medieval peasant, I'd consider that an omen from the gods if I'd ever seen one. In terms of Celtic symbolism, I'm unsure if this idea of the crow as a messenger of death came from multiple depictions of goddesses of fate being shapeshifters, or if the goddess of fate and bloodshed is depicted as a crow because of the reason just stated, but the battle crow she is nonetheless, and this remains her most common visual interpretation. The second goddess is that of sovereignty. She's closely tied to the land, with many areas in Ireland being related to her. One of my sources, the Order of Crows, who as far as I can tell actively follow the goddess in modern day, will go as far as to say the interpretation is she literally is the land. The association to the land and the way it was worshipped as bringer of prosperity and life in Ireland has ultimately tied her to the idea of birth and fertility. Her final piece is that of war, its intensity and frenzy. It's said that her shrieks instill such terror in men going to battle that many of them drop dead from the sound alone. There are at least 2 famous tales of the Morrigan I came across in my research where she determines the outcome of the war, assists a battle through magic spells of destruction, or uses her shape-shifting powers to torture or aid warriors. The Morrigan is actually a fairly popular reimagined character in pop culture, but there's only one that I am personally familiar with. In the game Dragon Age Origins, you play as a Grey Warden of various possible player-chosen backgrounds, tasked with saving the world from evil. Along the way, you enter the Kokari Forest, where you meet the character Morrigan. Outside of just the name, the parallels between the goddess and the witch are a clear inspiration. Morrigan is a shape-shifting witch of the wilds, born of the ancient witch Flemeth, who is rumored to have lived hundreds of years and had tens of daughters. Her daughters are fabled to be able to kill a man through fear alone, Flemeth herself using her power to change the tides of war, take down entire empires, and using her daughters to lure men to her hut to steal them away for one evil reason or another. The truth of these tales is debatable at best, considering Flemeth will only speak about them to crack a joke or ask some kind of creepy riddle-like rhetorical. Morrigan herself essentially tells the player they're all nothing more than stories. As a witch of the wilds, the daughter of Flemeth, Morrigan was raised far outside the borders of regular civilization and specializes in shapeshifting, a skill she uses regularly to both kill those who may threaten her, but also utilized when she was young to sneak into villages in order to explore culture and customs of regular people. In a story she may tell you in-game, she once stole a mirror from a noblewoman only for it to be smashed by Flemeth as punishment for risking being discovered. She shares that memories like these ultimately impart the lessons of self-preservation and self-service above all else into Morrigan. She's raised with special connection to the forest and unique appreciation for animals in the land, taking their various forms and spending time with them for companionship since she has no access to other people. Morrigan, especially in her original concept art, is depicted as a young woman in a hood with the feathers of a raven or crow adorning her. In the main story of Dragon Age, Morrigan is ordered by her mother to aid the Grey Wardens in their quest to slay the Archdemon. The Archdemon is a dragon born of an old god's soul, awakened by abominations called Darkspawn, bringing the blight to the land, spreading sickness and corruption. Ultimately, the way this goal is accomplished in the canon ending is through Morrigan's ritual. Traditionally, a Grey Warden must be the one to slay the Archdemon, since upon its death, the nearest Darkspawn will absorb its essence and then take its place. A Grey Warden stands in for the Darkspawn, as they purposefully ingest the blood of abominations to fight them. This kills both the Warden and releases the corruption simultaneously. In Morrigan's ritual, it involves conceiving a child with one of the Grey Wardens the night before the final battle. The embryo, through the work of blood magic, is turned into the most desirable target for the corruption to inhabit after the demon is slain. This spares the Warden who slays the dragon a cruel fate while still killing the corruption and facilitating the preservation of the old god within the future child. Morrigan will request that once the demon is slain, she will not be sought after, and then disappears once the ritual is complete at the end of the battle, never to be seen again. If the ritual is refused by the player, Morrigan says she will simply leave the Wardens to their fate, becomes a wolf, and leaves before the final fight occurs. Again, never to be seen again. She's actually seen again in a different player character in the later games, but when the first game came out, you're supposed to never see her again. To me, it's very clear that Morrigan isn't just inspired by the myth of the Tri-Goddess, she is the Morrigan, the goddess. A shape-shifting witch of great power who, through birthing the soul of an old god, becomes known as a god herself. Her reputation appearing to leaders before battle to predict death, her screams bringing death, the way she holds the fate of warriors in her hands, and her relation to the strategy in war and the legends of her testing men with various forms and punishing them for failing. An alternative telling to the myth for sure, but at the heart it remains the same. For all this, I would say her representation and depiction in the game, from her personality to her design to her actions, is done beautifully. In Western and European cultures, the crow is a symbol that is emblematic of death and decay. It can also be used to show cunning, intelligence, or trickery. Crows can be displayed in relation to witchcraft, taking the form of familiars, or even a transformed witch herself. In Native American cultures, crows are often seen positively as signs of good luck or fortune. The traditional Japanese view of crows see them as omens of death, but also messengers of the gods or legendary spirit guides. The list of stories, ideas, and folklore surrounding the crow seemingly goes on forever and can change dramatically between regions. The website birdfacts.com states that crows have a rich symbological meaning in practically every single culture and society worldwide, including ancient Mesopotamian, Mesoamerican, Greek, Roman, Indian, South African, North Pacific, Celtic, medieval European, Christian, and modern Western cultures. The use of symbolism can be subtle or obvious. It can be used to connect characters and ideas either to each other or to real-life counterparts. While this essay started as just a way to examine the bird, crows have led me on a journey of learning that has deepened my appreciation for games that I love, and the people who work so hard to bring them to life with these little details. Next time you're playing a game or watching a movie, see if you notice a repeating motif, visual or auditory. If you look into it, you may come to love and understand the experience more than you originally would have. Thank you for watching.